good night, everyone. Sorry about the late start. We were having some technical difficulties. And thank you, Jason, for letting everyone know and making them feel welcome. So, tonight, as you know, it's our last night for the seminar, and I just want to thank everyone for coming out. We have had some persons who have consistently joined us. So every night you have been here, and we really appreciate that. We appreciate the feedback that we've been getting on our emails and on Instagram. Also, we just want to thank you guys for your patience because we know that some of you have sent emails and you're waiting. Today, we started clearing up a bunch of those. We're going to just jump right into it for tonight's 1 second, guys. I'm just trying to get everything organized on my end. Okay, so as you know, a little bit about Minaj for Immigration. We're a boutique immigration company with our main location in Toronto, Ontario, and a satellite office in Kingston, Jamaica. We have been in business since 2018. We got incorporated, we got incorporated 2018. At the end of 2019, our acceptance rating stood at 92.5%. Um, we're meticulous. We try to pay attention to every little thing about each file that we handle. I'm the RCIC for the company. My name is Miniki Graham. I've been practicing immigration since May 2010. I've worked at three different law firms across Canada, two in Ontario, one in Alberta. Um, I'm going to keep going because so, what is unique about Minaj for Immigration? We offer one service that I can tell you that no other company offers right now, and it's a resubmission policy. So, if we're retained to handle your matter and it's unsuccessful for whatever reason, we will do it again with no additional professional fees. So we also have a cumulative fee system for payments. So whatever you pay will ultimately be going towards your final application. We have flexible payment plans. We have packages to suit different budgets. So we have different levels of representation. We have excellent customer service skills, and we try to avail ourselves for all our clients. Some of the benefits of using a representative, we try to we were trained to identify certain elements about each file. So we kind of hone in on the good and we try to like make the bad be less obvious for your files. Practice makes perfect with immigration as with anything. So because we do this every day, we have a knack of doing things. So we have a certain way of representing each client to make the best of their application. We know that everyone's time is valuable. So we believe that if you outsource important tasks such as these, um, you obviously stand a better chance for approval on your application. So we've listed a number of items. We've been doing this every night this week. So as you can guess, I'm a little bit tired tonight. It is the last day. So I'm just going to get right into it, into today's topic, which is family sponsorship. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about family sponsorship. Canadian citizens and permanent residents can sponsor their spouse, partner, dependent children, and others. On the screen, we've listed who can be sponsored. The ones that say restrictions apply, this is because they have like particular restrictions that you have to meet a certain threshold to be eligible for it. I want to point out specifically for parents and grandparents sponsorship. For those, you cannot just sponsor your parents or grandparents, you have to put in an interest to do this. So, first, you have to let the government know you have an interest to apply under these two categories. And then they will let you know when you can proceed with it. So, you have to be selected. It's a lot similar to the express entry where you have to submit an interest before you can apply for the permanent residence. Um, we're going to be focusing primarily on spousal sponsorship tonight. So we'll cover spouse, common law, and conjugal. We will touch a little bit on dependent children. For parents and grandparents, I'll speak on it a little bit, but if you have questions, feel free to ask those in the end. So, as for the legislation on it, it is entrenched in law for Canada. According to the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, A3D, the purpose of it is to see that families are reunited in Canada. Family reunification, according to them, we've put it on the screen so you can see that Canada is known to be very big on family. So most immigration applications, it will allow you to apply with your spouse or your dependent children. One of the quick facts that we wanted to throw in there tonight is that we get this question all the time, so we wanted to clear the air right here. You do not automatically get Canadian citizenship or permanent residence when you marry a Canadian. So you have to actually still meet certain conditions and you have to be sponsored. So tonight's presentation will be focused on that. So, sponsorship options for couples, it really depends on what kind of relationship you're in. If you're legally married, you can apply for spousal sponsorship. If you're in a common law relationship, then you can do the common law sponsorship. And if you're in a conjugal situation, you can do the third option, which is conjugal sponsorship. I'm just gonna I'm gonna try to differentiate between all these as we go along. I think we'll focus primarily on spousal right now, but let me just give you a quick overview. For spousal, as I said, you have to be married. For common law, you have to have lived together for at least 1 year. And for conjugal, you must be in an exclusive relationship with this person, and there's some element that's barring you from living together, common law, or marrying that person. So if you, for example, you're in a situation where you're in a same-sex relationship and getting married to that person is not legal in your country, and that person cannot get a visa to visit Canada to marry you there or something, then you'll go for conjugal. For conjugal, there are certain elements that also have to be met, and there are certain things that we always recommend for this third option. We will get more into that towards the end. Some responsibilities for the sponsor. So if you're going to be essentially when you're saying to the government, look, I want to sponsor this person, I want them to live with me in Canada, they're my family. You're doing an undertaking. So you're telling the government you're going to be financially responsible for that person. You're going to make sure all their basic needs are met for a period of time. How long you're going to be responsible for that person, this is really important because a lot of persons, in my practice, I've seen that a lot of persons end up getting messed up for lack of a better term because of their lack of knowledge about this. So you're responsible for your spouse that you sponsor for 3 years, whether it be spousal, common law, or conjugal. If you sponsored kids, you're responsible for them for 10 years or until they turn 25. What that means is that if you sponsor someone and they resort to the government for funds for like welfare or anything like that, you're going to be responsible for that money that they take. So it's kind of like you've defaulted on your pledge to the government that you're going to be responsible for this person. So the chart on the screen is showing like how long you'd be responsible. Um, just want to point out that parents and grandparents, this one actually changed. It's 20 years that you'll be responsible for them. So some criteria that has to be met when you're applying to sponsor someone. The sponsor has to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. They should be at least 18 years old. They should not be a recipient of social assistance. They should be able to sufficiently provide for themselves and the persons that's been sponsored. Even if they're sponsoring, let's say you're sponsoring your spouse and the spouse has kids, but the kids aren't coming, they're technically your responsibility financially. You should be living in Canada, or if not, you have plans to move to Canada when your partner or the children, whoever your sponsor, when they become a permanent resident. You may be found ineligible if you've already sponsored someone and it's not been 3 years as yet. Um, if you sponsored someone in the past and they went on social assistance and you didn't pay this back, or if you're owing the court for alimony or child support, or you're a sex offender, so you've previously been charged, convicted for sexual crime, especially true if the person that you offended is a family relation. That one is definitely a case of concern. Or if you've declared bankruptcy in the past. Processing times for these kinds of application, it varies from country to country. If it's outside of Canada, if it's inside, it's on average 12 months. It can be less. I've seen cases of 7 months even, if pretty straightforward and no issues. Oh, and yeah, we said if it's a little bit complicated, so if they need additional information, or if there are errors with the application, so if you didn't put everything in and you have like a boomerang situation, then processing time will be longer. Supporting documents. So, what kind of documents would you need to submit with a sponsorship application? If it's a spousal, you need proof of marriage. This should be recognized with the government authority. It does not have to be, we get this question all the time. You do not need a Canadian marriage certificate or a Canadian marriage license. If you did not get married in Canada, once it's recognized in your country as a valid marriage certificate, the government will accept that. Wedding invitations and photos, shared property could be a vehicle or assets like land, house, anything like that. Joint bank accounts or any kind of shared financial documents that shows that you guys share bills, share residence, benefits. So if you have that person recognized by your work as your partner, and there are additional stuff. So it depends on the situation. We'll assess it and we'll let you know what kind of documents. Some persons they require more than others based on certain things such as length of marriage, if the relationship is common law or spousal. If it's conjugal, especially conjugal is one of the hardest to meet in terms of our requirements. So we tend to hone in and go really deep with documents for that one. Proof of funds requirement. So this one is interesting because for family sponsorship, generally the rule of thumb is that you don't have to be working or making a certain amount to sponsor your spouse or the kids or or other dependents. However, if you're sponsoring your spouse and that spouse has kids who also have kids, then you're going to be required to meet at least you're going to be required to meet at least the basic income requirement. So low income cutoff, we call it LICO, you're going to have to meet that one. If you're excuse me, if you're sponsoring your parents or your grandparents, you're going to be required to meet the minimum necessary income. We're going to get to that shortly, plus 30%. So really the proof of funds requirement, it depends. However, if it's a straightforward just sponsoring your spouse and kids, there is no minimum funds requirement, so to speak. So for sponsorship applications, we have two types. It can be inland or outland. And this will affect certain things such as what kind of documents you're going to have to include and also where the application will be sent to. Other things that would be affected are like the processing times, obviously, and what programs the person who is being sponsored could access. For example, if they're being sponsored in Canada, so if it's an inland, they may be able to apply for an open work permit and they can start working in as little as 3 to 4 months. For outland sponsorships, the person would be required to remain outside Canada for the duration of the sponsorship. If they come in, that's fine. But if they remain here, it can affect certain things. If they if they're applying from outside, if they're applying from inside, sorry, and they leave and immigration finds out that they have left, it can result in immigration refusing the application to say that it's the wrong type of application that's been submitted. And an outside Canada application will then be requested. They'll tell you you need to apply for a new one altogether. For the inland, you should be living with your sponsor. If you have, I said this a while ago, if you have valid status when the application is being submitted, you can apply for an open work permit. Now that is a pilot program, so we don't know if it will when it will end. Usually for pilot programs, if it's going well, they'll just make it permanent. But right now, that one is still a temporary measure. So common reasons for refusal. If you're not able to convince the assessing officer, this one is for spousal or conjugal or common law. If you're not able to convince the officer that your relationship is real, your marriage or relationship generally, if they think it's fake, then they're gonna say it's out of bad faith, which in according to the Access R411. And if you're not able to satisfy both of these conditions, then you're going to be denied. So you need to show that you didn't get married just out of convenience, so not for privilege or status or just for acquiring Canadian residence, and your relationship is genuine. Before, you used to have to just meet one of those, but then it was changed after, and you're required to show proof of both. So inadmissibility. So when it comes to family sponsorship, there is a little bit of a leeway when it comes to medical inadmissibility. Normally, to get permanent residence in Canada, you need to ensure that you are admissible. So you need to pass medical checks and criminal background checks. However, when it comes to sponsoring your relation, so your family, you can get away with passing partially the medical exam. So for medicals, there are two requirements in order to be accepted. You have to show that you're not a threat to Canadians. So you have to not have a condition or a disease or something that can be spread to affect others in Canada, as well as you shouldn't be a burden on the Canadian system, so the social system. If you have a condition that will be burdensome to the system and you're being sponsored under this program, it can be overlooked, so you don't have to, you don't have to, you won't be refused on that grounds. However, if you have a condition that will pose a risk to the Canadian public, so something that's can be transmitted and will definitely harm others, let's say it's one of these smallpox, or you didn't get vaccinated for something and it's dangerous and it's contagious, then you can be refused on that ground. Another thing is that even if you're sponsoring someone and they have, let's say you're sponsoring your spouse, and that spouse has kids but they're not coming with them to Canada, they're not being sponsored, those kids will also have to be medically examined. You will get 30 days to do that. If not, and let's say they don't want to do it, maybe the mom or they're just not complying, the application can be refused altogether. So the person that's being sponsored can be refused on that grounds. For parents and grandparents sponsorship, um, for this one, as I said earlier, it's a little bit different. So that's why we're not going to go too in depth with it. The program was paused. They recently resumed, in fact, this year. It's been like this for this program on and off for, I'd say, since about 2013, 2014, where they stop. Essentially, what's been happening is Canada was, they had like a huge backlog going like 10, 20 years. Persons were just like pending applications, and then they decided to just start a new thing. So they're basically in trial and error stage, even with the one that's currently in place. The one in place right now is the interest one, where they allow you to submit your interest and then they do a draw. They say it's random. um, if you get selected in that draw, then you'll get an email saying, okay, you can now submit your application for permanent residence for this person. So mom, dad, or grandma or grandpa. For this one, they increased the minimum necessary income. So I'm going to show you the chart for that. It was not like this. I think it changed in 2015. So this is what it was changed to. You need to show that you made this amount. So obviously, in order to show that, you will need to have filed your taxes for the last 3 years before you submitted the application. So let's say you're doing it this year. As you can see from the chart, this year they significantly reduced the required income only because of obviously COVID-19. So they took that into consideration, and it goes by your family size. So if you have a large family, you're going to need to show more money that you've made for the last 3 years. Oh, and I did say this a few nights before. Most of the programs that Canada have for immigration, they have different requirements when it comes to Quebec. So that's something to note. This chart and the previous one, it does not apply if you're applying to sponsor somebody to live in Quebec. So Quebec has their own rules, their own regulations. They're allowed to do things differently over there. So just to bear that in mind. An immigration tip: sponsors who are unable to permanently support their parents. So if you're unable to meet the required income that's in the chart here, you can do a super visa for mom or dad or grandma or grandpa. That will allow them to stay in Canada for up to 2 years at a time. So usually you get a 10-year visa, but unlike the regular visa where you have to leave every 6 months, if they have a super visa, they can stay up to 2 years at a time. Your spouse can also co-sign your application if you don't have enough funds here. You can get your spouse, whether it's common law or legally married spouse, to co-sign with you to meet these required income. The basic eligibility requirements for this kind of application: you obviously need to be a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen before you can do it. You have to be 18 or over. You have to be able to show proof of relation. So you can't say it's your grandma and then there's no documents to show lineage for birth, birth certificates to show that this is your grandma or your grandpa or your parents. You must have filed your taxes for the last 3 years because we're going to need to assess if you meet this requirement based on the notice of assessment from CRA. Um, I made some additional notes that was not prepared in time for the slides. I'm just going to go through those quickly. So there is a program right now. It's for undeclared family members. So what happens is once you're applying for permanent residence in Canada, you need to declare all your family members. If that person is not declared, essentially what happens is that you can't sponsor them. You can't suddenly say to the government later on, oh wait, I forgot to tell you, I have a daughter. Here she is, and I want to sponsor her. It will not work. However, in 2019, last year September, the government said, look, things happen. Maybe there was a reason why you weren't able to declare the person, why they were not able to get examined medically. So they opened a pilot program that's running for 2 years. So it will end next year, 2021 September, and it's allowing persons to now be able to sponsor persons who were previously not declared. So it's kind of like a little window that's open up now for you to sponsor, whether it's your spouse, your kids, or whoever, as long as having that person on the application would not make you ineligible. Um, Another thing, if you were sponsored, if you got your permanent residence through spousal sponsorship, you have to wait 5 years before you can sponsor someone. So even if it's a child, let's say you have a situation where wife sponsors husband, husband says, you know what, my kids are back home in my native country, they're fine, they don't need to come here. This is something that has to be discussed from the get-go, because if the kids are older, for Canada to sponsor your kids, they should be 22 or under. So if the spouse has a child who is like close to that age, and he's saying, I'll get my PR first and I'll sponsor them later, this is something that they would need to bear in mind. So this is a discussion we often have to have with persons who are in this, and we get this a lot. They say, oh, I'll sponsor them later, I'll just do mine now. But then you have to bear in mind that 5-year wait that you will be barred from applying to sponsor these kids. If you sponsor someone, you have to wait 3 years before you can sponsor someone else. Um, you can be ineligible to sponsor someone based on your criminal record, as we said earlier, especially if it has to do with it depends on the crime. However, if it's a violent crime or if it's a crime against a family member, immigration does take this into great consideration before they accept. The child, if you're sponsoring a child, this child should be 22 or under. If over 22, you must be able to show that this child is dependent because of a mental or physical disability or condition. You can't sponsor your spouse child without sponsoring them. So you can't be married to someone. Let's say you're married to John living in Barbados, and he's saying, you know what, I'm not ready to come to Canada, but you can help my son. You can't do that. In a situation like that, you can probably adopt the son and sponsor him. But if you're going to be sponsoring John's son, you need to have John on the application as well. Documents for these kind of applications can be country specific, so it's important to note where the person is applying from and what their nationality is if it's an outside of Canada sponsorship. Um, Another main thing that messes up a lot of persons is if the non-accompanying parent is not willing to sign. So if you're sponsoring kids, one parent is here, the other one is back home. The other parent who is not being sponsored to Canada, that person has to sign that they're okay with this child leaving to go and live in Canada. Without that document, you can look at like either the application being refused, or if you try to contest it to say, listen, I'm trying to talk to her, she's mad, or he's mad that I've moved on, he's unwilling to sign these documents, or maybe just whatever explanation you want to give. Immigration can hold up, like that application can be delayed for even 5 years, and maybe at that point in time the child can even be ineligible to be sponsored. So this is something that has we have to discuss with our clients all the time. It has to be said. You have to make sure that the other parent is okay with it, because you can end up in a situation where your entire application for you being the one in Canada being sponsored, you can be in limbo for that whole 5 year delay. I'm gonna move over to the chat so I can start taking questions right now, or if you have questions you can raise your hands. So Galaxy J7 says, what if a dependent child is 22 years plus, so over 22, and they're a full-time student? No. So this used to be the case previously, where if you have a child over 22 and you can show that they are still a full-time dependent because they're in school full-time and everything, you could sponsor them, but this was changed. So it's no longer the case. Only kids over if you have a dependent over 22 that has a mental or physical disability can be sponsored. So they're not factoring the education aspect of it anymore. Um, Jaleesa said she missed the student session, but her question is for proof of income as a student as a bank statement. Okay, Jaleesa, tonight is not the night, but I'll still quickly try to answer this. If the proof of income as a student as a bank has to be okay, no, the bank statement does not have to be in your name for student visas. It can be in someone else's name. There are certain documents that you would have to provide for that. Taking questions over here now. Audrey, you can unmute.
Hi, Miniki.
Hi.
I like your ping going on there, your coral. Just a question. The requirements are kind of similar to somebody who's applying for a student visa that's kind of wants to take a common law partner or a husband. Isn't it similar or the same?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Audrey.
Okay, so like we were saying, to sponsor a husband,
Mm-hmm.
conjugal partner, we needed some stuff like your marriage license. You need to prove that you live together. You need to prove assets or stuff like that. Is it the same like if you're applying for a student visa?
Oh no, it's no, not really. The requirements are different for a student visa versus if you're being sponsored.
All right, so if I'm a student and I want to take my husband, would
Mhm.
I need the same documents as if I were a PR and I want to sponsor
Oh,
them?
okay, I understand. No, not necessarily. There is a little bit of an overlap in terms of relationship. If you're a student and you wanna have your husband accompanying you, and you have like your marriage certificate, that's sufficient. You don't have to prove anything regarding the relationship, how real it is, so to speak. If it's a common law relationship, there is a declaration form, but you can have that declaration form in addition with additional stuff to you can show, like let's say you have joint bank statements, you have a joint lease agreement or something, you can do that. However, the burden of proof requirement, that threshold that you have to meet, it's a lot lower for like a temporary resident application such as student visa or visitors visa, something like that for a relationship.
Okay, so I get it. No one is like holding a stick over your back if you're a student. It's just to make
Yeah, it's a lot
you deal.
easier.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Miniki.
You're welcome. Um, that was okay, Janice, you can go ahead. You can unmute.
Hi, my question is, I've joined late discussion, so I'm not sure if it was answered before. Um, but in the case of that, if the person necessarily is not a blood relative, but they still have a want to sponsor you, and they've known you for a good part of your life and what's not, and like would have been there for you growing up or whatever. Can they sponsor you?
Um, it depends. There is one way where you can sponsor someone who is not your spouse or dependent child, not your family at all. That person would have to show proof that they don't have anyone that they can sponsor that falls in that list. So they don't have any parents, they don't have any spouse, any children outside, any brother, sister, like no one in Canada, no one outside of, and they should have no one in Canada as well. So no other family. So there is a little leeway there, a little bit of I'd say like an unexplored pathway to sponsoring non-relation, so to speak. But that person would have to meet certain requirements. So you have to show that there's nobody else. You have no family in Canada. You have no family outside of Canada. So you want to sponsor your friend.
Okay. But okay, so in a sense of let's say the person wants to sponsor person, but the state the person that is living with outside of Canada is in a state of like poverty, poverty in a sense that they're poor. They come from a poor background or what's not, and they want to, for instance, give the person a chance to be able
No,
to go to
okay,
school and
no,
stuff like that, or
that's
that doesn't factor in.
yeah, no, that's not one of the categories for this.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not. They can invite you to apply, and then when you come in, they can help you probably do a humanitarian or something, depending on the situation. But they can't sponsor you based on that alone.
Oh, okay. No problem.
No problem. Thank you, Janice. Lisa, you can go ahead and is your hand up? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm gonna assume.
We have
Oh,
a couple of questions in the chat.
oh, okay. And let me go over to there.
Um, if I have a visitor's visa for Canada, would I need an invitation for my 1-year-old child in order to apply for a visa for her?
Um, so you have a, sorry.
If I
Okay,
have a,
okay. Okay. Yeah. So in a case like this, you may or may not, it depends on who the host in Canada is. So if you're going, you already have your visitor's visa and you're planning to go stay with a family or friend, you can get that. It's optional. It's really optional. It depends on the documents. You don't necessarily have to get an invitation letter from them for her. You can show proof that you already have yours. You probably traveled on it to see them before and you have travel plans coming up. So there are certain documents that you can use. It's not mandatory that you would get an invitation letter for a baby like that. Um, I'm seeing a message from Taj. I'm soon to be graduate. So Tash says, I'm a soon to be graduate with a degree. I also have a diploma. I have limited work experience, but I'm willing to be part of the program. Am I qualified? So Tash and anyone else who's here tonight who wants to know what program they can use, you can visit our website and complete the assessment, and then we will be in touch with you. We've gotten some feedback that the assessment response is going to spam mail, so please check your spam after you've completed it. It will either tell you what program you're eligible for right off the bat, or it may request additional information. The most important thing is to respond to the email sent, and then we'll be notified, and then we'll be in touch with you thereafter.
Michelle is asking if you can go back to one of the earlier slides to explain a sentence in that slide.
Yeah,
Any
I know.
relation.
So, Michelle, I think you're asking about, which is what I just explained. If you want to sponsor someone who is a non-relative, so it's not related to you in any way, regardless of age or sex or anything, this person, the person who wishes to sponsor you, must show proof that they do not have anyone in Canada, so no family in Canada and no family outside of Canada that falls into these categories that are here. So let's say it's a friend of yours that's in Canada and this person is all alone in Canada. I think it's the lonely Canadian category. That's the what we call it. And you have no parents, no kids, no siblings, nothing that you can sponsor. There is a specific way to do it. It's a little bit uncommon for this kind of application because of the requirements. Not many persons are able to meet these requirements, but technically that's what we're referring to here. Someone asked, how long after marrying a Canadian citizen can you submit paperwork for permanent residence? There is no time frame. After you got married, you can go right away, or you can go right away with your application. You can wait. It's up to you. There is really no limit, no time limit on that. Davia, you're asking about migrating to Canada with your mom, spouse, and brother. Your mom would have to do her own application. You and your spouse and your child can be on one application. Oh, you said your brother. So your mom and brother would be on one, and you and your spouse would be on another. So you can't. We don't have like a joint. That's like two different families kind of thing. What I would recommend you do is also complete the questionnaire, like I said previously, and then send an email to us once you're done and you get that auto response. Jordan, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, good night. So I wanted to know, my stepmom is a citizen born over there.
Okay.
If I were to get a visitor's visa for myself and my daughter, would it be a case where I could stay over there and then do the migration aspect of it?
There are certain programs that you can apply to from inside Canada, given that you meet the eligibility requirements for them. It would have nothing to do with your stepmom though, unless she's just being the factor to facilitate you, to invite you and host you. Yes, you
Right.
can, but she would not be able to sponsor you.
Okay, so so I could actually just use her as the facilitator to say, hey, I have someone here, but as it relates to all other aspects, I'll be doing it on my own.
Yeah, you would have to meet all the eligibility requirements on your own.
All right. Does your I joined late, so I may have missed a lot of stuff. Does your website, provide further information on as regards to the programs, or what would be more
Our
suitable for myself and my daughter?
our website states which kind of programs we cover. It won't be able to tell you. You can do an assessment to see what program you could be eligible for, and then
All right.
respond to that. But we don't have the specific requirements and the criteria and all that on the website.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll try the assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. With the ongoing pandemic, good question. Regarding travel right now, I actually had some notes on that to mention, but I guess I forgot. With the pandemic right now, Canadian borders are closed as per the Quarantine Act that's in place. So visitors coming in for leisure purposes are not allowed at this time. The last time there was an update, they said it will be closed until January. It's been like that. They've been extending the date, obviously because of the COVID-19. Now that the vaccine is being rolled out, I'm not sure if they're gonna open it up in time for summer next year. But right now they are accepting applications, but visitors are not being accepted on the grounds of like leisure purposes. Our spouses, the only spousal sponsorship, the only application that has a medical exemption. No, it's not just for spousal. It's a very limited list for that medical exemption that I mentioned. Another one on the list that I can tell you offhand is for refugees. They are also exempt from that medical requirement. Post the website with the questionnaire. Jason, you can just put I think you've already put it at the start. I'm not sure, but you can just put the website in the chat window. Um, are there any more questions before we wrap up the final
Before
session?
we wrap up, can we also cover the assessment, how they can find us on the website?
Oh yeah, so for the assessment, as I stated earlier, you visit the website, there's gonna be something under that says start assessment. You can just select that, you put all your information in. If you have a spouse, put his or her information in there. If you guys have your updated resumes, it will be a lot easier for us to access the profile and get accurate information. You will receive an email after telling you specifically what program you're eligible for, or if we need additional information, please respond to that email. Also check your spam folder because it may go there as well. Once you respond to the email, then we'll be in touch with you thereafter to tell you next step procedures on what we can do for you. Um, the final question, okay, we have two more questions. Um, what would be needed as proof for common law relationship when there are no children or joint bank accounts? So there is actually like a whole list that we can go through. What we do prefer to do is to talk to the persons, because sometimes depending on your lifestyle, the document list will be tailored towards you. So let's say Jody, your list will not look the same as Jason's list. It all depends on some factors, depending on the relationship you have, what kind of proximity. Are you guys close to your family? Are you closer to your friends? Are you guys employed, self-employed? For example, if you're employed, even your employer can write a letter. That person would be an objective character, an objective person in the application. So their letter of support would be a lot more, carry more weight than a letter from your mom because of the close proximity. So it all depends on the situation, and we kind of tailor our checklist depending on the person's profile and their lifestyle. Jordan, I think is your hand up, or you've already asked your
Oh,
question?
no, no, I'm sorry. Let me put it down.
Okay. So with that being said, guys, I'm just gonna wrap up, and I want to thank you guys again for coming out tonight. If you joined late or you missed the session, you can, Jason put in the chat earlier how you can access the recordings. Whatever email you used when you signed up, it will be sent to that same email address. The recordings for all of this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this was useful. That you learned something. If you have any questions, I can be reached at minashproinfo@gmail.com. It's also in the beginning of the chat. Jason put it up already. Thank you again. I hope you guys have a good weekend. Any questions that I missed, you can also send them to me by email, and I'll do my best to answer them.